Got
it. Again for that. My name is Mark Mormons. I'm with the Arizona Commerce Authority. I help lead entrepreneurship and venture development, and excited to be here today for this week's Small Business Boot Camp as we help prepare you to return stronger than ever. So we're excited to put on this boot camp in partnership with resources across the state. Really excited to work with this group of partners as well as many that are not listed here. We continue to grow the list. And today you'll be hearing from some of those partners. We have Karen Eads from Pike College and SBDC on the line as well, who's going to walk us through some of the details for today's session. So what is the Boot Camp and Resource Collective? It's designed to help small businesses like yours, small businesses with 20 employees or less, prepare to navigate and come back from the COVID-19 crisis. It's a statewide initiative supported by our community partners. So all those people plus many, many more listed on that previous slide, working together to deliver the latest news, resources, and support to small businesses like yourself. This boot camp, this is week 3 now. It's going to keep running for the next several weeks, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and so we're excited to kind of continue delivering it and tweaking it to make sure it's meeting your needs. And the other piece of this is a resource collective where we're collecting information from our partners across the state so that we can house, aggregate, and deliver kind of all the latest programs, initiatives, and resources to you on our website as well. So this week, today we're going to be talking about what happens after you receive your PPP loan. We know there's a lot of questions around how to use those funds, around forgiveness, how to track them, and so Karen will be covering a lot of that. Tomorrow we'll be talking about how to manage your employees during a crisis. Wednesday we'll be talking specifically about the restaurant industry and how to prepare them for reopening. We're going to be having 2 sessions, one at 9 in the morning and one at 3 p.m. on how to return to work safely. Those will be in content, so you don't have to plan on attending both of those. Just if you can't make it at 9 or 3, we wanted to give another option. And then finally on Friday, we're going to be talking about marketing to return stronger. So how to make changes or start marketing for your small business to help get the word out about what you're doing in these times. So some quick updates, and Robert Theobald is our small business ombudsman from the Arizona Commerce Authority, also on the line. He can speak to these numbers a little more during the session. But PPP round 2, we're really excited because Arizona has received a large number of these PPP loans. We're top 16 state for funds approved and number of businesses served. We've had over 51,000 small businesses in the state receive PPP loans, so we know this topic is going to be really relevant today. And in terms of reopening, today's a big day. It's the first day in the state where restaurants are available for reopen for dine-in options. And so as you can see, the reopen is beginning. On last Friday, we had salons and barbershops open as well. So we'd encourage you outside of just the Small Business Bootcamp, there's a lot of great resources that the Commerce Authority is offering. We do work with workforce, talking about employees. We support manufacturing, and we've got, like I said, all these partners, including the SBDC, that you can link to from our site. So please check out our site, azcommerce.com. There's a great COVID-19 resources page right on the homepage. And so you can follow that and navigate from there as well. So today I'm very excited to be introducing Karen Eads. She did a great presentation for us last week as well. And so she's a pro. She's with the Yavapai College SBDC. And she is here to talk about what to do once you've received that PPP loan. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, hand it over to Karen, who's got a presentation as well. And if you've got questions or comments throughout her session, please use the Q&A tool at the bottom of the screen, or feel free to use the chat box. And we'll be posting up links, resources, answering questions throughout, as well as have plenty of time for Q&A after. So Karen, you can go ahead and share your screen. Take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to walk you through what happens now that you received your PPP loan. So first, congratulations for getting that. I know this is a really difficult time for everybody, but these SBA loans are really helping. And I really want to walk through today what the loan is and a little bit about forgiveness. And then what's really important is tracking and documentation for how you spend this money. So that's the agenda for today. Okay, so what is the Paycheck Protection Program loan? It is really a two-year term loan with a 1% interest rate. And that interest begins accruing immediately. However, you don't have to make any payments for 6 months. So the first payment is deferred for 6 months. However, the interest does start accruing as soon as you get the loan proceeds. The loan can be forgiven if it is used in accordance to the forgiveness rules. So that's what I want to talk about today. I do want to preface that more direction will be out from the SBA regarding this. So I'm giving you what I know as of today. So forgiveness rules. During the 8-week period immediately after you've received the funds can be used for 2 different things. So 75% for payroll expenses, and that's really what this program is about. This is a payroll protection program. So it's about being able to make payroll, hire your employees back if you've let them go. But this is to really cover expenses, payroll expenses. And then the other 25% you can use for other expenses. And I'll talk through what those other expenses are. I just want to note that you cannot use another SBA loan product for payroll for these same costs in the period. So what does that mean? If you received an EIDL loan, you can't double dip per se. You can't use those proceeds for payroll in addition to these proceeds for payroll, like duplicating. So I'll talk more about that in a sec. So payroll expenses. Well, how do they categorize payroll? It includes wages, salaries, commissions, and tips, normal payroll items that you would pay your employees. It also includes funds for employee vacation, parental, family, and sick leave. And then group health insurance premiums, retirement benefits, and state and local taxes. So these are all of the items that are deemed payroll expenses. Federal taxes are not included in this calculation. I want to talk a little bit about headcount because this has been a question a lot of people have had. So the 75% payroll for payroll expenses is really based on what you submitted when you requested your loan from the bank. And it's all about retaining headcount. So you can hire back the number of employees that you had, but you have to be at pre-COVID-19 levels. And this is based on average number of full-time equivalents. So if you have 2 people that are working part-time, say 15 hours each, those together would be 1 full-time equivalent. And those numbers can be determined by one of 2 ways. So you can either look at your number of employees that you had from February 15th, oh, I see a typo there, 2019 to June 30th, 2019. Or you can use the period January 1st, 2020 to February 29th, 2020. One of those 2 periods are what is noted in the CARES Act right now. So you can use one of those 2 periods. And if you have seasonal employees, then you should use the period February 15th, 2019 to June 30th, 2019. So you want to get your employees, your payroll back up to that level because that's really important for forgiveness. So if you have employees that have been laid off and you want to bring them back, one of the things that we're hearing right now is because of the generous federal benefits for unemployment, some employees are opting not to come back. It's very important to make sure that when you go to rehire someone, that you offer them their position in writing, and that if they turn it down, that you get that documented and they've signed off on something, because what will happen is they will technically be no longer eligible for an employment, but you have to prove that you at least extended that offer to them. You have up until June 30th, 2020 to rehire your staff so you get your payroll levels up to where they need to be for forgiveness. So this is something a lot of people have questions on. It's a little confusing, but really it's all about getting back to the staff levels that you had pre-COVID-19. So in addition to payroll expenses, 25% of expenses can be used for these other type of expenses. So the first being mortgage, however, it's interest only. It does not include the principal payment. So you can use your 25% of other expenses towards the interest on a mortgage. You could use it for a rent or lease, and you can use it for utilities, and I'll talk about what utilities are a little bit later, with what's included. And then interest payments for loans incurred before February 15th. However, those that is not forgivable, that amount. So the mortgage, the lease, and the utilities, all of those had to have been in place prior to February 15th, 2020 for those payments to be applicable for other expenses. So that's really important. You want to make sure that, you know, if you're paying money on a lease, that that lease was actually in place prior to February 15th, 2020. I just want to go through a real simple example here. I just also want to say that everything is based on the information that you submitted to the bank for the loan in the beginning. So whatever payroll numbers that you submitted and whatever number of employees that you had during those times I just talked about, that's what all of this is going to be based on. So this is just an example to walk through. Say you had a monthly payroll of $4,000, and that was 3 employees. Your loan amount when you went to the bank would have been your average monthly payroll, the $4,000 times 2.5%. So you get $10,000, say that's your loan. So for payroll, you can spend 75% of that on payroll expenses. It's a minimum. So you can spend more on payroll, but that's the minimum amount that you can spend. And then other expenses would be that other 25%, which is $2,500. So you can also, the other thing you want to be careful of is if you've also received an EIDL advance grant. So a lot of people have applied for the EIDL grant, and they've been awarding, I think, $1,000 per employee. So if you did get that money needs to be deducted from the payroll protection program amount, because you can't claim the 10 or whatever you got for the EIDL and then in addition to the payroll protection program amount. So you have to subtract that. So that'll be done in the calculation of what potentially is forgivable. Okay. So filing for forgiveness. This is really important. There's a lot of documentation that's going to be required. Some of the things that they're looking for, and this will be the bank. So when you're going to get an opportunity to actually apply for forgiveness, and you will do that through your bank. They will determine if you've met the criteria for the rules that are put in place. So the things that the bank might be looking for are documentation verifying your FTEs for those periods we talked about, and then what you currently have for employees right now. Payroll tax filings that you reported to the IRS. State income, payroll, and unemployment insurance filings. Canceled checks, payment receipts, transcripts of accounts, or other documents verifying payments. And then you're going to have to certify that all this documentation is applicable and truthful. Now, I have a colleague that actually just received a note from a bank in another state, and she was told that, you know, in this letter that they were going to be looking for specific pieces of documentation. They would make the decision about the forgiveness, and that a lot of these documents are going to be required. And what they're actually requiring is that the recipient of the loan keep the loan money in that bank. So one of the things that we're recommending is make sure the funds are kept and dispersed from a business account. That's going to be really important. Ideally, you'd have a separate bank account for this money so that you can prove everything that went in and out. And this particular bank that I was just talking about, that my colleague has her PPP loan through, they said that unless you have a separate account, they won't really have an easy way to document it. So it's going to be a lot harder to prove. So my recommendation to make it easier, put these funds in a separate account so that you can really keep track of them, all the ins and outs, and you'll have the paper flow for that. I also recommend keeping a spreadsheet of all the applicable payments, and I've actually put one together, so I'll show you that in a minute. And then if you get an idle advance, I would also notify your lender, because as I said, that comes off of your PPP forgiveness amount. You want to make sure that your lender knows that you received that. So tracking and documentation. I know this slide's probably a little bit hard to read, but the key thing here is keep track of who you paid, when you paid them, and how much you gave them on their paycheck. So salary, wages, cash tips or equivalents, how much was paid out for vacation, parental leave, family leave. These are all the things that I talked about. That way you can prove that you actually adhered to the forgiveness rules and that you have a paper trail of what you did. So this is something that I just put together in Excel that I think would be helpful. In addition, another Excel sheet just to put your other expenses that you've paid. You can put those on a spreadsheet and keep track of those as well. It says that you could include utilities. So what are the utilities that are eligible for this forgiveness payment? And it would be electric, gas, water, telephone, and internet. That's what they're deeming as utilities. And then of course the lease or rent, and then the mortgage interest that I talked about before. So tracking and documentation is going to be really important through this whole process. So what happens if you don't use all the money for payroll? The funds that are not forgiven are carried forward as an ongoing loan. Because remember, this is actually a loan. So it's a 2-year, 1% interest loan. It just happens to have a forgiveness component to it. So you want to make sure that you're documenting what could potentially be forgiven. So what isn't forgiven will then just turn into this 2-year loan. The principal and interest will continue to be deferred for a total of 6 months. And if you want to pay it off early, there's no prepayment penalty. So that's important to know too. But the most important thing about this loan is it needs to be used, the majority of it, 75% for payroll. That's what this program is all about, keeping people employed. So that's why the forgiveness rules are what they are. Let's see, a little bit about SBDC services. So we've helped a lot of people prepare for filing for these loans, walk them through what they needed to do. This is work that we'll continue to do. In addition to that, we normally provide free confidential counseling. We do workshops just like this one on a regular basis. We have local partnerships with our chambers and regional economic groups. So we have a wide network, including all the SBDCs in Arizona and then throughout the nation. So if we don't have the answers, we have access to somebody that does have the answers. And we can help in all areas of business planning. If you need to get a loan, we can help you prepare to go to the bank for a loan. Any type of business planning, which I think is really important right now. You want to make sure you have a good plan in place for going forward, especially if you're reopening after this. And then once again, we have access to SBA and microloans too. So we can help you get a loan if needed. Prepare to go to a bank to get a loan, to be specific. So that's a little bit about our services. If you need help with anything with PPP, if you have questions about tracking or documentation, contact your local SBDC office and they will be able to help you with that. That's it. Any questions?
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. And we have a lot of questions, which means I think it's a, no, it's a great topic for us. Before we jump in, could you please just write some contact information either for yourself or for SBDC in the chat? I think a lot of people have questions on kind of some of those resources that you mentioned, the best way to get in touch with them. And then I'm gonna help walk you through some of what's come up in the Q&A box as well as in the chat window.
Hi, Mark, it's Andy. Also, I just want to make sure everybody, we're recording all of these sessions, and also we'll provide the documentation of what's been presented on our website as well. So you'll have those documents as well. Thank you.
All right, I'm trying to get to my chat. For some reason, it doesn't.
Karen, I'll walk you through some of what's come through the chat window. So the first one is with QuickBooks. Is QuickBooks record keeping sufficient in terms of a record keeper tool, or is QuickBooks preparing any documents that will extract the information and can be pulled directly from the company's books?
Well, I think in QuickBooks, you can run reports and show who you've paid. I don't think that would be sufficient though. You're gonna need tax filings, you're gonna need copies of actual documents. They may go as far as, the bank may go as far as requesting copies of checks. I don't think just the reports out of QuickBooks will be sufficient. However, that they could replace the spreadsheets that I've put together. I think the bank is gonna want more information than just a QuickBooks report.
Great, thank you. And you started to mention this, I'm sure people are still wondering, if I spend 100% on payroll and 25% more on rent or utilities, can the whole 2.5 weeks be forgiven?
Wait, I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Oh, well, it's questions on forgiveness. It says 100% on payroll and 25% more on rent, but that would be 125. So I'm guessing if you do the 75% on payroll and the 25% on utilities, can the whole thing be forgiven?
That would be the application, yeah. So if you apply to have the loan forgiven and you've spent at least 75%, it sounds like you're spending 100%, yes. It's allowing for 25% of other expenses. The key thing here, you know, everybody huge raises to make up the funds. You want to be in line with, you know, what your payroll was previously. But yeah, if you use it all on payroll, fine. If you have to hire more people, that's even better, right?
What about someone who is contract labor previously and has now been brought on as a full-time? Does that hire qualify for the PPP loan?
If they are a full-time employee now, if they brought on somebody new and they are part of the total head count, yes, that should apply. They're going to look at number of people and they're going to look at the payment amount. And long as those are in line with what was in place pre-COVID-19, yes, that should work.
Thank you. So for FTE numbers, we had 15 average in 2019, but on February 28th, 2020, due to growth, they were at 17 employees. So our PPP loan was based on January 2019, basically 2019 numbers. So how do we know what number to use for the payroll FTE?
So that goes back to the dates that I was quoting. I think that you have a choice. So there's two dates that you can go by. Either I have to look it up because I don't remember them off the top of my head. January 1st, 2019. So it's either February 1st, 2019 through January or June 30th, 2019, or you're looking at January 1st, 2020 through February 29th, February 29th, 2020. Those are the two dates that are in the CARES Act right now that say you can pick one of those two. You have a choice. So whatever the levels were at that time, that's what you have to get, one or the other. Hopefully that answers that question.
Thanks. And with regard to timing around rehire, so on the flip side of when you can rehire through, I believe you mentioned June 30th, 2020, someone's saying it's still low season in Arizona. And so have you heard any discussion, have you heard any talks about extending kind of that hiring date for seasonality?
I have not. Right now, the seasonality, they're looking, I think I said through February 15th through June 30th. I just want to say that I think there's going to be more clarification about the forgiveness process and the rules and all of that. I'm anticipating that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, because right now there's still a lot of questions, and I think we're going to get more clarity on that.
And also on that June 30th piece, so does that mean if I only hire them back the last week of June because they're shut down until then, is there no reduction in the loan forgiveness?
This is a question I don't have an answer for that. That's one of the questions I have as well, because if you open late and you can't rehire until later and you've already received your PPP loan, how do you spend those funds, right? So that's where I'm anticipating more clarity on these rules.
And for the people on the line, we are kind of constantly watching to see as that clarity comes out. And the second that there is, we'll likely do another session with more information. We want this to be as timely as possible for all of you. So we might not have the answers to everything just because that information isn't out there yet, but as soon as we get it, we'll find a way to translate that and pass that on for all of you. We have some questions around utilities and rent. So you mentioned in the presentation, but could you repeat what is included in utilities?
So gas, electric, water, telephone, and internet.
And so that would not include personal property equipment. Is that correct?
Personal property equipment, I don't understand what that means.
Let's see. Jim, if you want to clarify that in the chat window. That's your question, Jim Barish. Does rent include personal property equipment rent for qualifying rent? We can come back to that. Are portions of the PPP forgivable if you can use it all within the timeline? And then is the remainder of it converted into a loan?
Yeah, so if you don't, whatever's not forgiven automatically gets converted into a loan. So if you don't spend it all in the 8 weeks after getting the money, then what is not forgiven automatically converts into a loan. Yes.
What if some of the payments were from a bank account that was not the account into which the PPP funds were deposited?
The most important thing is that you have documentation. Hopefully those were from a business account and not a personal account, because you're going to have to prove that you use those funds appropriately. So I think it's just keeping good documentation is the most important thing.
Here's one that I'm sure will come up a lot. What if you're a sole proprietorship and you're the only employee?
Yes, I didn't touch on that. So you would have applied for your PPP with some type of a payroll number, whether you used your net income or your draws, whatever that number was. You just want to use, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself a paycheck for that money, because that's the money that whatever you put on your application, that if you're by yourself, that's obviously your payroll. So you just want to make sure you're paying yourself like you normally would. Write yourself a check every 2 weeks or every week, just like it would be a payroll check, so that you're using that money.
And just to clarify, I believe you mentioned this, if the interest payments are not forgivable, they just become a loan at 1%, correct?
That's correct.
Is it acceptable to use 100% of the PPP for other expenses and just pay the loan back at 1% interest?
Yes, I mean, yeah, if you, it's a loan, right? So the thing that's really nice about this loan is there is this forgiveness component, but if you, whatever is not eligible for forgiveness, or if you use it, my understanding though is I believe you still have to use it on payroll and you have to use it on other expenses. It's not just like a free loan. So it's just whatever isn't forgiven is going to convert to a loan.
And have you seen any guidance on the inclusion of workers' comp premium payments in the calculation of payroll for forgiveness purposes?
I have not. I'm not sure about that. That is something I am not sure about. That might be something that we could include as a follow-up at some point.
Okay, that is fine. Can the idle advance be used for payroll after the 8-week period of the PPP in order to not have the PPP amount reduced by the idle advance amount?
I do not believe that there is a way to get around having that idle advance deducted from your PPP. So I think that even if you used it after that, you're still going to have to deduct it because it's kind of like double dipping.
And then for documentation, can you use your bank account statement as proof if you only use that account just for PPP expenditures, especially if you pay some of your utilities online without an actual paper check?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to use your bank statement for that because, right, a lot of people do pay online. So the bank statements are going to be really important. I think when it comes to the payroll expenses and that, you're going to have to use your IRS filings and that type of stuff. I do believe bank statements will be applicable documentation.
And Karen, we have some questions about kind of voluntary employee changes. So one is employees left the company willingly after the February date because they moved. Are they still included in those we are required to rehire for loan forgiveness? Another one was a planned retirement that happened during this time.
So it doesn't have to be the same employee. So yeah, that's a good point. As long as you get your head count back to where it was, that's fine, but it does not have to be the same employees. You can hire somebody new.
And so if, for example, the planned retirement, if you had planned to go to one less headcount, you can't necessarily do that right now. You'd have to maintain the headcount number that you had at the start. Is that correct?
Yes. It's all based on headcount and the total number of payroll. Mm-hmm.
And you've talked about this. If an employee does not come back or you decide you don't want to bring an employee back, can you hire someone in their place?
Yes.
It's just about the headcount, not the person.
Right, exactly.
How do you account for expenses accrued but not yet paid? For example, unemployment taxes, workman's insurance, practice insurance, building insurance. That might be an accounting-centric question. We can hold that.
Let's hold that. I'm not positive about that.
Yeah, and for Lynn, the person who asked that question, I would also, the SBDC does have a lot of business coaches, including accountants and those types of individuals. And so that link that I posted in the chat for those resources, as more information comes out, we'll do sessions on these types of topics, but you might want to reach out to them as well for that accounting expertise. If I pay 1099 contractor, does not need to report that as income for her taxes, or is the money tax-free if the loan is forgiven?
A 1099 contractor isn't part of the payroll. These are actual full-time employees, FTEs.
So Karen, we had that question, a similar question earlier that I answered, just typing in the answer. And I think it's real important that everybody understand that even though you have a 1099 people working for you, if you're paying them a 1099, they are not employees. If you're paying taxes on them, they're your employee. And so please don't get confused thinking that if you have a bunch of 1099 employees, that you're going to be able to pay them and have that forgiven. It will not be forgiven.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, you're right on that.
Can a percentage of home utilities be counted for employees working from home?
I cannot answer that. I don't know. That's an accountant question.
All right, perfect. We will save that. The 75% of loan for payroll need to be paid to employees by a certain date. Is that the June 30th?
That's the 8 weeks after you get the loan. So it's really important. You have to use that money within 8 weeks of actually getting the funds.
Bob, this might be a question for you. Karen, I'm sure you can answer it as well. Can you guys just talk a little bit about the differences between the idle advance and how that works relative to the PPP loan?
Yeah, they're two separate programs. And the idle loan has an advance portion that is forgiven. But as Karen mentioned, that the forgiven portion, the idle advance, that amount will be taken off your forgivable portion from the PPP. So you essentially only have one forgivable amount total if you have both, if you're using both programs. The PPP is a 2% term over, or 1% term over 2 years, where the EIDL is a 3.75% interest over 30 years. Both have no prepayment penalties, and both have no application costs. So, you know, a side note is hopefully your banks didn't charge you for applying for these loans. But one way, if you're getting both, the EIDL, you know, recommendation is to use the EIDL for your operational costs and then use the PPP for your payroll. Karen, you may have some other comments as well.
No, I agree with that.
Karen, we're getting a few questions on kind of changes in payroll expenses. So because payroll expenses were submitted as an average for the last year, but a lot of groups work off commissions or there's high season, can they pay their employees higher than the average now with this money? And similarly, if they needed to give kind of a hazard pay bonus, or if they wanted to increase salaries during this time with these PPP loans, is that something that's possible?
I think I'm honestly not positive on that. I think you can give, you know, a smaller raise. You can't go giving everybody a bonus to use up those funds, right? That would not be right. If you're hiring somebody back at a different rate level, I'm honestly not sure of that. I know it has to be at, you know, you have to be at the level you were paying them before. So it shouldn't be less, but I'm not sure if you can go and give a bunch of raises, and I'm thinking not. I think it's, you know, you want to maintain the level that you were before, but I'm not positive on that.
Okay, we will note those down and come back to those as further guidance is established. Yes, you can apply it to hiring a new employee, not including payroll costs. Self-employed. I'm self-employed, only employee, and don't use payroll. What documentation do I need to submit for forgiveness?
Well, if you're going to write yourself a check, you just want to keep track of those checks that you're writing yourself, because that's like your payroll check, right? So yeah, just make sure you're documenting what checks that you're giving yourself as payroll, because you're going to use up those funds that you receive for that.
And in terms of documentation for hiring back employees, is email recommended and sufficient, or would you recommend certified letters or another way?
That's not my area of expertise. I think you want to have something in writing. The most important thing is to have something in writing. I think that you need something signed from them if they're not going to come back, so you have proof that they turned down your offer.
And for payroll costs, what about employees that were paid more than $100,000 per year? Can you pay their full payroll during the 8 weeks?
That there is an exception on the over 100,000. And honestly, I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I would have to look that up. Bob, do you have that information?
I don't have it exactly. My understanding is that you cannot pay them more than the equivalent of 100,000 a year in weekly salary. So if they make more than 100,000, then during that 8 weeks, they'll get the pay equivalent of 100,000 over the 8 week, you know. So.
And we did have a comment in the chat from that last question. Third-party proof is required, so a certified letter from the PO would be best in terms of documentation on rehiring. So there's a few more questions on idle advances and PPPs. If they're used for totally separate types of expenses, you would still deduct the advance from the forgivable amount. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does the health insurance component for payroll also include LTD, life, and dental premiums?
I don't know if it's that specific or not. That might be something we need more clarity on as things come out. I haven't seen anything specifically on that. I've just seen health insurance.
Got it. QuickBooks, we talked about QuickBooks. For health insurance premium, is it only the amount the employee pays, or is it the full premium that the company pays out?
I don't know. I'm thinking it would be the amount that the company is paying out.
Sorry, I'm just trying to collect common themes here. I know we've answered a lot of these.
There's a lot of questions around this program.
A lot of questions, that's right. Another question about independent contractors who received a PPP loan for their own pay as shown on their Schedule C. Do you still have to document what you used the money for?
Yes, the forgiveness rules apply to everybody, right? So if you're paying yourself, you have to keep track of 75% that you're paying yourself, and then you can use the other 25% for expenses.
Here's a good question that I've seen come up a few times. If employees turn down reemployment, do you have to replace them to achieve forgiveness?
I believe there is a ruling pending on that if you've offered somebody a job and they've turned it down, I believe there's a ruling that is waiting to be approved on that where you may not need to include them. But I don't know if that is for sure yet.
And we had a little bit more clarity on some of the utilities and rent questions. Does forgiveness around rent, is that only for kind of real estate rent? Or are there also kind of property rentals that people can get, property as in equipment rental that people can get forgiveness on? I
believe it is just rent. I don't think it's equipment rentals.
It's a space and real estate thing.
That's my understanding.
Are owner draw payments considered to be payroll?
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking, when you applied and you used owner draws because you never paid yourself payroll, right? That's how you calculated what the PPP loan amount is that you applied for. Then when you pay yourself, so, every week or every other week, that amount for payroll, then that's how you're keeping track of your payroll. So, because some people don't actually cut payroll, they just pay draws. So, and if those numbers were included in your application as part of your payroll, then you just need to document that you've paid yourself.
I'm saying we've also got Tom Fulcher listening in, who's been a real advisor, supporter, and he says draws don't count deferred to net earnings, but at forgiveness it has to be salary with taxes withheld. And Tom, I'm going to see if I can find you and unmute you in case you can help us answer some of these questions. I know that you've been really helpful as well.
Could you repeat that too, because I didn't catch that?
It says draws do not count deferred to net earnings, but at forgiveness, it has to be salary with taxes withheld. Let me see. Tom, I'm going to unmute you. And so if you want to comment on that, or if you have kind of thoughts on some of these other questions as we go through, and I don't want Karen's voice to go hoarse from having to answer hundreds of these, so we can bring in some more team members.
And no worries. Karen's doing a great job. Yeah, when you calculate the basis for the PPP, draws are somewhat irrelevant because they're a cash, they're not a income statement item, so you use the net earnings. But when it comes to forgiveness, you have to actually pay yourself a salary check to be forgiven. That means taxes withheld, all that sort of thing.
Some questions on timing. If you received the loan on 4/20, but payroll was processed on the 15th, can that payroll be included in your worksheet of payroll paid?
Say that again, if you
received the loan on the 20th of April, but you had done a payroll on the 15th, can you count that previous payroll on your forgiveness worksheet?
I don't know. I would think not. You just have to use from the date going forward, it's 8 weeks, and you have to use your payroll within the 8 weeks, but I don't know that for a fact. I don't know if that you could use a previous payment. I would think not. That's my opinion.
We did have a meeting with Craig from the SBA, and that question was asked. And at that point, he told us it could not be retroactive.
If you only meet partial headcount, so if you bring back 3 people instead of the 5, can you get partial forgiveness or a portion forgivable, or do you have to go back to the full headcount in order for any of it to be forgiven?
No, there will be a calculation that is used. So if you don't have the full head count, whatever that percentage is, will be in the calculation for what actually could be forgiven. So depending on what percent of numbers you're down, that's the percent that would be taken away from what potentially could.
What if I received the EIDL loan but don't need it? Can I return the money without interest?
I believe, I believe you can, you can return it because there's no prepayment penalty on either of these loans. I don't know if any interest would have been incurred, depending on how long they kept it before they gave it back, but.
How do I determine who to pay back regarding the EIDL if it just showed up in a business account? Your bank or the SBA? No paperwork has been mailed to me so far.
I didn't hear the beginning of that.
The funding for EIDL just appeared in their bank, and they're trying to figure out who to pay back, the SBA or their bank, because they haven't received any paperwork.
Yeah, so this is something I'm hearing from a lot of clients where the money, the EIDL advance grant is just showing up in their bank account, but they haven't received any of the documentation regarding the actual EIDL loan. So I'm not sure how to answer that. Tom, do you know?
I've seen a couple people get their actual loan without documentation. But first, to address the specific question, that loan is with the Treasury. It's not with your bank. So if you want to pay it back, call the disaster loan phone number and make those arrangements. If you don't know where your EIDL stands, call that disaster loan phone number. Make sure that you ask them to go to the second tier, because the first person may tell you, due to privacy, they can't tell you anything. Just tell them, I've heard the SBA and I've heard other companies get help. She'll transfer you, or he will transfer you to the lending department. And then if you have your confirmation number and all that information, they can actually tell you exactly where you stand. About 80% of the people I've talked to have called and gotten through the second tier can find out exactly what level loan has been approved, if one has been approved yet. So, but yeah, the EIDL is with Treasury. So that's who you pay it back to.
Can you we answered retroactive payment. It's for going forward. Where's that paid on? Since the amount covers 2.5 months, does it have to be paid out over exactly 2.5 months?
Over the 8 weeks, yes.
So what if you cannot pay it out sooner, right? So you can't use the total amount over that 6-week period or over a 5-week period
Well,
to try and maximize forgiveness?
I mean, you have to use it all up by then, but I guess I don't understand the question, because that would imply that you're spending more on payroll.
Yeah, I guess it could go either way. It could go spending more or trying to drag it out for longer. And so I guess the easy answer is you can't drag it out for longer. Is that correct?
Right.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
there are some situations where people may have underestimated their payroll, and maybe that's what they're thinking about. But that's going to create issues. I know several times where people forgot to include the owner, or they didn't understand the rules because it was someone over 100,000, so they didn't count them at all. Those were mistakes. But as Karen said, use it up in the 8 weeks. And if you happen to use it faster, as long as you meet the 75-25 split, it should be okay. But you got to meet all the other rules of the program.
Got it. And these are really great questions. Thank you, Karen and Tom. We still have lots and lots of questions and lots of people on the line. If you two are available, I'd love to stay on with you and just keep answering out some of these questions for as long as we can, if that's okay with you.
I have to run to a 10 o'clock meeting, but I will give you one more answer that came up earlier about the $100,000. You know, the bottom line with this is always do what you need to do for your business. Don't get hung up on making sure you do everything exactly right. But on the $100,000 question, if you have an employee making more than 100, you should probably still be paying them more than 100. But their forgiveness stops at the 100, plus the health insurance and retirement contributions are on top of that. But thanks for letting me join in. I have to run to a meeting. Karen, great job. Thank you, Mark. I'll get on the spreadsheet and answer more questions there.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Karen, are you available for a little longer? Nope. Karen, is it all right if you stay on for a little bit longer?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. So there's questions about retirement plan contributions and what can be included in forgiveness. Is it safe harbor match only, profit sharing plan contributions?
I don't know the specifics around that. All that the CARES Act says is a retirement. So what I've seen isn't really specific.
I submitted the PPP application, but my company has less than a year active. Is that why it may have been denied?
It's less than a year active. I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think people that have been under a year have still received PPP. So I'm not really quite sure what the circumstances were for that.
Yeah, they can still qualify for a PPE even if they're not been open for a year. So if you were denied, you need to reach back out to the bank and find out why you were denied and what their reasonings were.
You know, one thing I do want to say is there's a lot of questions about the specifics, like on retirement and that. These are the ones that are going to have the application for the forgiveness. So some of these questions that might be also to talk to your lender. Because hopefully they have some guidance. I mean, they probably are still waiting for additional guidance to come out, but the lenders are the ones that are going to be processing the request for forgiveness. So hopefully they will have some of these specifics as well.
Here's a great question. There have been a lot of changes in the program or new guidance that's coming out. How do we stay in compliance, or how do we kind of adapt or change accordingly? And so especially in early days while we're waiting for more information, if decisions are made or payments are made, do you have any advice or guidance on how to best prepare for more information or operating through this ambiguity?
Well, for me, I think it's just document everything that you can. You know what the rules are right now. Stay in touch with your lender, because as I said, your lender is the one that's going to actually have the application for forgiveness. And then I would also say continue to work with, the ACA is doing more of these webinars, and with the SBDC as well, we're doing webinars too. As we get information, we're trying to share it. So I would just say stay tuned for more webinars. So hopefully we can do a follow-up to this one when we get a little bit more clarity.
Thanks, Karen. I wanna answer this question from Julie. I think we've answered it, but I don't want you to think that we're skipping it. Sole proprietor is limited to 100K. Short of forgiveness, can you please address? I think we've talked about that. You can pay them the full amount. It's just you can only forgive up to 100K. Is that correct, Karen?
Yeah, because yes, it does not go. You cannot include salaries over 100K, right? That's
for
like,
forgiveness purposes.
Yes, for forgiveness purposes. The threshold.
Answer live. We did the payroll question. So if you receive PPP on 410, can you use PPP for 415 payroll? Yes, because that would be after you receive those funds, so you can use that. If there was a mistake in calculating the PPP loan, can you file a second application?
I don't know. That would require a conversation with the lender.
Says new businesses are okay if you started prior to 2/15 date. Our utility bills have past due balances included with the new balance for May. Is the entire balance forgivable if paid in the 8-week window?
Ah, that's a good question. You're using it for utilities. I don't know how rigid they're going to be around that. I'm not really quite sure. Anything going forward, but I don't know if that would be past due is appropriate too. You are paying a utility, so I'm not sure.
Okay, everyone, as there's still tons and tons of questions, what I want to say is we're going to continue to address these. We download and document each question from every session and are working on building out a comprehensive kind of FAQ document as these types of questions come in. We could probably stay here all day and answer these types of questions because there's a lot of confusion out there. It's a new program and we're still figuring it out. I want to thank Karen for her time today. I'll send her some of these questions offline as well to see if we can get her expertise on some of them for in writing. Like I mentioned, this webinar was recorded. I'm going to post the link one more time so that you can watch this again, register for future sessions, and also watch any past sessions that you might have missed. As you can see, this is a really hot area with a lot of questions and energy around it. So I'm sure we'll have more speakers coming back to talk about these types of questions in the future. Sorry that we can't stay on longer, but if you do have any last questions, please continue to post them either in the chat box or the Q&A because we do download all of those and we'll try and answer them offline and post them to our resource collective on that website that I just sent out. Karen, any final comments or any last minute questions that you wanted to jump in and answer?
No, I just want to say, stay tuned for more. I think it's really important that we stay connected because we're expecting more guidance to come out. And I don't know, as you mentioned, Mark, this program has changed. It's evolved since it was first put out. So I don't know what future changes we're going to see. I do expect more clarity. And I think, as we get that information, we'll share it most certainly with everyone.
Well, we'll leave this open. And also, if there are other topics that you'd like to hear from us on, whether it's PPP and EIDL or whether it's kind of business fundamentals around finance, marketing, whether it's about safety protocols and guidelines, please leave those in the chat as well. We're listening and we want to make sure that we're addressing topics that are important to you. And again, a big thank you to Karen for helping us out today and with your expertise. So we'll leave this line open for a little while longer, and we hope to see you in a future session. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions today, but we will get to them. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.